welcome to Real Estate Resource. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll know when new videos are available. I really hope you enjoy this one. We're jumping back into the RPA. Today we're going to cover it from the very beginning. We're going to look at, even as we go through the RPA, we're going to be looking at the addenda and some of the forms that go along with the RPA. So we'll be doing that in the conversation. We'll be looking at the forms that we're talking about. So what I like to do when we look at the RPA, and I know this is, we've done this a couple times a year, is we look at it from not just the perspective of a buyer's agent and the things that you need to understand to protect yourself and to protect your client, but really more importantly from the view of a listing agent. The RPA is already super buyer friendly. It is there to inherently, by default, protect the buyer's interests in the purchase. So for us as listing agents, if we don't understand the RPA better than the buyer's agents, it puts us at a disadvantage and puts us in a position where we're maybe not protecting our clients enough. Guys, I see offers over and over and over again. I see them all the time. I review stuff. I do things. I don't think that listing agents counter enough. We talked about counter offers the last 2 weeks. I think that we are too quick to accept an offer. When we are a dual agent, we're too quick to write an offer exactly the way we know it's going to be accepted. And those kind of things specifically are the ones that cause the issues going forward, where people don't trust us. Right? That's where we get into that position where people don't trust real estate agents, because we're trying to take the easy route instead of doing the things that ultimately what we can to protect our clients. And that should be our first job, right? Is to protect them. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen unless anybody has a question quickly. If not, I'm going to share. So let's get started because we've got a lot to cover. So we'll be doing this for, a few weeks. So let's look at the share there. All right. So what you should be seeing is the disclosure regarding agency relationships. And as I like to do, this is where we start. Whenever the disclosure regarding agency relationships is part of a document that we're talking about, I like to go into it because it is super overlooked. People dismiss it. They look at it as either they misunderstand it or they think it's unimportant. So first things first. This is not a commitment for a buyer, seller, or agent to work together. This is no commitment. This is strictly what it is called, a disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships. And what that means is I am disclosing to my potential client what their rights are in how they can be represented by an agent. Now, if I'm going to take a listing, then I'm probably going to be the seller's agent. Right? Pretty straightforward. If I'm writing an offer, I'm going to be the buyer's agent. And if I have a listing where I'm representing the seller and then I also bring the buyer in, I will be acting as a dual agent representing both seller and buyer. And in that case, I have to get the permission of both the seller and the buyer to act as a dual agent. And there's another form that we're going to go through today that gives you that permission. I know this is not new information that we're covering, but I'd like to remind you guys because it seems like we forget about it. Now, if I work with a buyer and the first time we sit down together, we go through my buyer consultation, I talk to them about what their wants, their needs are, explain to them how the contract works, we've gotten them qualified by a lender, we've done all that stuff. And I have them sign an agency disclosure, this disclosure regarding agency relationships. They sign this and I have it. And that's today. Let's say it's February 1st. And I go on an appointment with them this weekend, right? The 3rd and the 4th, we go and look at properties, we don't find anything. Next weekend, we go and look for properties and we don't find anything. Finally, on the 3rd weekend we go out, we find the house that they want and I write up an offer. I already have this disclosure regarding agency relationships signed if I did my buyer presentation, my buyer consultation correctly, but I know it's going to come again with the RPA. I don't have to fill it out again if I have one already filled out. I can use that disclosure regarding agency relationships to send with any offer that I do. I only have to have them sign it once over the period of a year. If we get past a year, then I have to redo it, Now, hopefully, when you're working with somebody, you don't work with them for more than a year before you get them qualified. But let's say, for example, excuse me, I work with an investor and I have him sign on January 1st or February 1st, whatever date you want to use. I have him sign a disclosure regarding agency relationships because we're going to write an offer. I can use that same disclosure over and over and over again for the next 12 months whenever he wants to write an offer. I don't have to do one every time. I know it's easy to do one every time because it just comes with your RPAs when you print them out. But understanding how these work maybe makes you a little bit more efficient. Wouldn't it be nice if you had somebody that you were writing multiple offers with, if you just took this out and only brought them the RPA? Because if I have them sign a PRBS or a fair housing, which we're going to go over, I can use the same ones over and over again. So instead of 27 pages that I have to have them initial sign and go through, I now only have to stick with the RPA because I've done it before. So what it does is it makes you more efficient, makes you look more professional instead of doing the same things over and over and over and over again when they're not required. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions about that? No? Okay, so that's the disclosure regarding age relationships. It is just that. It is a disclosure, how you may be represented. And the right way to explain it to your buyers is just that way. Hey, this disclosure is required by the Department of Real Estate for me to provide to you on what your rights are, our duties as agents, and your rights as a seller or buyer. And this is how you could be represented by an agent. Number one, as a seller's agent, that would be if we were representing you as a seller only, or as a buyer's agent if we're representing you as a buyer only, or as an agent representing both buyer and seller if we're representing both the seller and you as buyer, or vice versa. In that case, I am required to get permission from you to act in that capacity. And that's it. That's what this form does. It doesn't force you to work with me. We're not committed to work with each other. It is just this, a disclosure. If you choose after the fact, we do our consultation, you don't want to work with me any longer, this doesn't force you to do that. The buyer signs, the brokerage firm, the name of the company, our license number, right? So for us here that work in this office, it's Century 21 All-Stars goes here. That license number is 012800965. Your name, your license number, and the date that you signed it. Please don't predate signatures for your clients. I mean, I know some of us do that. It's not a great idea because then it's not really true to when they signed it. Because if I wrote this offer yesterday and they signed it tomorrow, but I've predated it, then our dates don't match. Always make sure that when you're having your client sign something, you remind them, sign and date, please. Sign and date, please. Sign and date, please. Now, speaking of signatures, please, as agent, please make sure you're signing everything. The disclosures regarding agency relationships, the PRBS, anywhere your signature is required, the RPA, anything, the RPA, you sign it. If you have a counteroffer that comes in, you're the one responsible for your clients to sign it. Please make sure you're getting that stuff done. That's the basics, guys. So signatures, make sure everything is signed before you turn your files into whoever you're turning your files into. Okay, because remember, ultimately you become responsible. You're the licensed professional. So please make sure everything is getting signed. You will confirm the agency that you have explained to them in your purchase agreement. And here is an example of the confirmation. Don't try to fill this out. Don't confirm agency with this form. Don't circle seller, buyer, or dual. Don't circle anything because that becomes kind of like a passive confirmation of this is who I am and that's all I am. Okay? Just leave this form as is, have them sign, have them initial, move on, do your explanation. Okay? Questions? All right. Fair housing and discrimination advisory. Again, all this is, and we're not going to read through all of these civil codes and the laws. It just means you cannot discriminate against any of these protective classes that are in this little box here. By race, by age, by citizenship, by medical conditions, by color, by sex or sexual orientation, immigration status, any disabilities, ancestry, their gender or gender identity or gender expression, primary language, genetic information, national origin, marital status, if they're a military or veteran, criminal history, their religion, their family status, source of income, or any arbitrary characteristic. So what we're saying here is you can't say, I don't want to sell to somebody because they have children under the age of 18. That's discrimination. You can't say, I don't want to sell to those people because they're Catholic or Jewish or Muslim. You can't do that. Those are protected classes. So just in the conversation here with your clients, let them know that, hey, we cannot discriminate against any of these classes for any of these reasons. You can't choose not to sell to somebody who's qualified just because of their race, their color, their religion, their sexual orientation. You can't do that. Okay, it's illegal. And it also mentions in here about the love letters, about not to provide those love letters. There is in the listing agreement, and for anybody who doesn't know what the love letters are, that's when a buyer writes a letter that gets sent in with their offer that says, hey, here's a picture of my family, here's some information from us, this is why we love your house so much, it's perfect for us. The reason that they're discouraging the use of those is because they feel like it could lead to discrimination. Let's think about it for a moment. If I write an offer that says this is from John and Mary Smith, and they're super qualified, and I receive that as listing agent and provide that to the seller, and the seller goes through and goes, man, the qualifications on here look fantastic, let's do it. And they're like, we're ready to go. And then you say, oh, by the way, here's a love letter from the family, and they open the family and look at it and see, oh, it's not what race I thought they were, or they're a different religion in that letter. And they say, yeah, you know what, change our mind, we don't want it. So they think that there could be some information that's shared in those love letters that could cause people to make a choice based on those protected classes as opposed to just the quality of their offer. In the listing agreement, there is a spot where the seller could say, hey, I want to see those. I want those letters. And then you have to provide them. How could I legally refuse service? You can choose whatever you want based on the qualifications of the buyer and the terms of the agreement. There's nothing that says that just because it's the highest offer and just because they're putting the biggest down payment, I have to accept it. It just is saying I can't say I'm not accepting your offer because you're one color or one race as opposed to one that I approve of. That's all it's saying. I thought you couldn't use love letters. Yeah, you're not supposed to. You're discouraged from using it, but in the listing agreement, there is a section for the seller to request those. So what line is the acceptance of love? I don't have the listing agreement in front of me, but it's there. So we'll talk about that when we cover the listing agreement. Any other questions about the fair housing? All right. Possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent. This is what we talked about when we were talking about acting as a dual agent. This is the form. This is the document that's going to have that, if they sign it, is going to give you permission to act as a dual agent. So multiple buyers, broker, and remember, dual agency is not just me as listing agent, me as buyer's agent. It is anybody under the umbrella of the brokerage. So any agent that hangs their license with Century 21 All-Stars, or if you're watching this on YouTube, wherever you hang your license, any agent in that brokerage, it now constitutes dual agency, and we have to get permission of that. Okay, so understand that if you have a buyer or you have a seller or a buyer that says, I don't want you to be a dual agent, I can understand that. But if we just dismiss dual agency altogether, you're now cutting out all of the other agents that work in my office. That means any kind of leverage I could have to help get your offer accepted with one of our listings is gone. Okay, and the same thing for a seller. We have all the great buyer's agents in the world working in our office. You're going to now eliminate all those great buyers by saying you don't want to work in dual agency. Now, not wanting me to represent, that's two different things. But let's not just dismiss dual agency altogether, but you have to understand how dual agency works before you allow them to dismiss it. Here's the thing. We don't handle dual agency properly, the majority of agents. And because of that, we're going to get to the point where they're going to make it so that we can't act as dual agents. They're going to take it away. If you're worried about what's happening with the lawsuits with the buyer's commissions and things like that, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but if you're worried about those things, I would be more worried about us handling dual agency better so that that's not the next thing that gets attacked, because we don't do it right. If I act as an agent, as a dual, I'm representing both buyer and seller, my job is to act as a impartial person in the middle. And from what I've witnessed, the majority of agents don't do that. They make it about them being able to double in. And don't get me wrong, I want you guys to double in. The more deals that you could do, the more productive you could be, the better for you. Double lending, you're much easier to work with than some outside agent that you don't know. I get that. But we got to do it the right way, which means I write the offer as if I don't know who the listing agent is or the seller is. Right? If I'm representing the buyer, I write the offer that way. Hey, listen, just as if I was writing an offer on somebody else's listing where I don't know the seller, I'm going to write the best offer I possibly can. That's what I'm going to tell my buyer to do. And then when I get that offer and take it to my seller, I'm going to show to my seller and I'm going to present it like I was presenting an outside agent's offer. And I'm going to explain to them what's on there and what isn't. And then whatever they want to counter, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a counter offer to my own buyers to fix the items that need to be fixed, to make it more palatable for my seller, to make it so that it represents what my seller is willing to do. We don't do that. There's two reasons we don't do that. Ego is one of them, because I don't want to, as listing agent and buyer's agent, go back to my buyer and say, oh, here's a counter from the seller, because I'm afraid that my buyer's going to say, well, why didn't you just write the offer the way I wanted it, right? They wanted it so we could get it accepted. Because that's not the professional thing to do. Right? I'm not supposed to tell the buyer exactly what the seller wants. And I'm not supposed to tell the seller exactly what the buyer's willing to offer. I'm supposed to write my best offer, and then I'm supposed to counter it if that doesn't match the terms that my seller's interested in. And if you're afraid to do it, then blame it on the office. Go to your client and say, hey, my office doesn't allow us to counter our own offers when we double in, so our managers or our brokers have to review our offer, and they will write the counter offers. Put it on us if you don't want to bruise your ego with your buyer. But it all starts with the conversations that we have with the buyers and the sellers, because if I'm a dual agent, I'm going to talk to the buyer, and yeah, I want my offer to get accepted, but I want it to be the best offer, not just because it's mine. There's many times out there, and you guys are aware of this because you work in the industry. You're out there actively working, writing offers and getting offers accepted and rejected and things. There's plenty of times where a dual agent is accepting their offer that isn't as good as offers that they received because they're looking to protect their pocketbook, not because they're looking to protect their seller. So I want everybody that's watching this video to just be better, just be more professional. And you should be writing the offers as if you don't know what the seller wants. And you should be countering the offers from the seller's perspective, not trying to make it work for your buyer. Okay, I'm off my soapbox now with dual agency, but we got to be careful, guys. I think we could do dual agency right, but if we're not careful, it's going to be the next thing that's going to be in jeopardy as far as how our business is run. Multiple buyers, broker, individually or through its associate licensees, may be working with many prospective buyers at the same time. These prospective buyers may have an interest in and make offers on the same properties. Some of these properties may be listed with a broker and some may not. Broker will not limit or restrict any particular buyer from making an offer on any particular property, whether or not broker represents other buyers interested in the same property. So all it's saying is we're not going to stop you from writing an offer even if we have other buyers that want to write the offer. That's it. Multiple sellers. Broker, individually or through its associate licensees, may have listings on many properties at the same time. As a result, broker will attempt to find buyers for each of those listed properties. Some listed properties may appeal to the same prospective buyers. Some properties may attract more prospective buyers than others. Some of these prospective buyers may be represented by broker and some may not. Broker will market all listed properties to all prospective buyers, whether or not broker has another or other listed properties that may appeal to the same prospective buyers. We're not favoring one over the other. That's what they're saying. Hey, look, we're going to have this brokerage has many listings that match these criteria. We're going to market them all just as hard, and we're going to show them to all the same buyers probably, but we're not going to limit who gets to see it. We're not going to preference one over the other. Dual agency. If seller is represented by broker, seller acknowledges that broker may represent prospective buyers of seller's property and consents to broker acting as a dual agent for both seller and buyer in that transaction. If buyer is represented by broker...
What are you trying to sneak in?
If buyer... Alfredo unmuted his thing and threw me off where I was reading. If buyer is represented by broker, buyer acknowledges that broker may represent sellers of property that buyer is interested in acquiring and consents to broker acting as a dual agent for both buyer and seller with regard to that property. In the event of dual agency, seller and buyer agree that a dual agent may not, without the express permission of the prospective party, disclose to the other party confidential information, including but not limited to facts relating to either the buyer's or seller's financial position, motivations, bargaining position, or other personal information that may impact price, including the seller's willingness to accept a price less than the listing price of the buyer's buyer's willingness to pay a price greater than the price offered. And except as set forth, a dual agent is obligated to disclose known facts materially affecting the value or desirability of the property to both parties. So nobody has to raise hands or admit it out loud, but how many of us have acted as a dual agent and said to the buyer, look, let's just write it at this because I know that they're willing to take it, or has said to their seller, look, they can't come up to full price, but I know that they can come up this much more, so let's just get them to that price. Are you okay with that? That's not allowed in dual agency, and that's one of the things that we break all the time. Is that covenant of dual agency is that we share that information with either party. Just the same way as like motivations. How many of us as agents have told our buyers on our sellers, oh, hey, the sellers are getting divorced, so they're super in a hurry to get the property sold. That's their motivations. We're not supposed to disclose that. Or have told them, well, here's the thing. They're 2 payments from getting into notice of default, so they're in a hurry, so let's just make a great offer. Those are the kind of things that we're not supposed to share with the buyers or vice versa with the sellers. Those are the things, and that's what I'm talking about. Is we tiptoe past that line lots of times when we act as a dual agent because we really want to put that deal together. Ultimately, we've got to take ourselves out of it and put ourselves in a position of what's best for my buyer and what's best for my seller, not what's best for me. And if we keep doing those things, we keep pushing that line and we keep going into those gray areas and, just wink, wink, these are the things that are the issues, we're going to jeopardize dual agency. And one of the other things that I always like to kind of touch on when we look at this form is offers not necessarily confidential. I know as a buyer's agent, and we talked about it in the buyer process training classes, right? We call the listing agent before we show the property to make sure it's still available if they have any offers. We show the property and then we call them after and say, hey, we're thinking about writing an offer. You still have any offers? When are you presenting? When I write an offer, we call them again and we do that. Excuse me. And in part of that conversation, we try to ask them, hey, what's your best offer? And every time the listing agent tells us, well, let's say not every time, 99% of the time the listing agent will tell you, I can't tell you that, it's confidential. It isn't confidential. Now, I'm not saying fight back. When the listing agent tells you, oh, no, it's confidential, you don't go, oh, no, it's not. PRBS says, no, it may not be confidential. Don't do that because then you're not getting your offer accepted anyway because, you seem like a know-it-all or smartass. Just accept it. You're not going to get it. Maybe if we ask the question a little differently, right? Hey, this is what we're thinking of offering. We're thinking about offering X, Y, and Z with no concessions, blah, blah, blah. This is what we want. Am I wasting my time with an offer like that? Right? That's the question. Now, a good listing agent, if they know your offer is better than what they've got, they're going to be like, no, you're not wasting your time. So I think that's a better approach. This is what I'm planning on offering. Are we wasting our time putting that offer in? They may still go with, oh, I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. Put your best offer in. Okay, great. But you have to try, right? Now, if I'm a listing agent, if somebody calls me, if I have a listing and somebody calls me and says, what's your best offer? I'm telling them for 2 reasons. Either I'm going to dissuade them from writing an offer because I don't want to present a bunch of offers, right? If they can't compete, I don't want their offer because I still have to present it and I still have to respond to it and it still has stuff that I have to do, okay? If I have the best offer and I tell them what that best offer is, and they come back with a better offer, because these offers are not confidential, I can now turn around to my buyer and say, hey, buyer, I just got an offer that's slightly better than yours. You have 2 options. We can stick with your offer. I'm going to present it, and I'm still going to try to push for them to use you. Or we can better your offer to beat or match the other offer. What do you want to do? That's it. My buyer doesn't want to, then I'm going to still do my job, and I'm going to present. That's it. So offer is not necessarily confidential. Buyers advise that seller or listing agent may disclose the existence, terms, or conditions of buyer's offer unless all parties and their agent have signed a written confidentiality agreement. Nobody does that. Whether any such information is actually disclosed depends on many factors, such as current market conditions, the prevailing practice in real estate community, the listing agent's marketing strategy, and the instructions of the seller. Buyer and seller understand that broker may represent more than one buyer or more than one seller, and even both buyer and seller on the same transaction and consent to such relationships. Period. That's it. It's over. So they're not confidential. You can share the information unless there's a written confidentiality agreement. Jesus said, why are allowed to write on the CRM list motivated seller with no problem? Because nobody's turned them in. But I mean, isn't that kind of like a given? If I put my listing on, shouldn't all sellers be motivated? So I think the reason that that's not a problem is, yeah, they're motivated. We're talking about their specific motivations. Like, you can't put in, these people just got divorced, need to sell their house in the remarks. But if you write motivated seller, well, yeah, no kidding. All of the sellers that are on here should be motivated. So, yeah, no, that's not an issue, motivated seller. We're talking about their specific motivation when we're saying here we can't disclose their specific motivation, not just that they're motivated. I hope so. I hope all the sellers are motivated. I hope your buyers are motivated. If they're not, start working with different ones. All right, questions about the PRBS before we move on? No? All right. Wire fraud electronic funds transfer advisory is just an advisory. We're not going to read through it. Just tell your clients wire fraud is rampant. Before you wire any money to anybody, please run it by me. Do not just go by that you got an email. Let us verify that it came from your escrow, that it came from the title company, whatever it is, right? They have those title escrows. Let's verify the person that sent you the email. Make sure those are the correct wire instructions. Don't do anything until I give you the thumbs up. That's it. That's what you tell them. That's what this advisory basically is. Okay? The home insurance advisory is now new. Just got added last December. It's explaining to them importance of getting the home insurance because we've run into so many problems with home insurance. It's really difficult. It's more difficult. It takes more time. It costs more money for buyers to get home insurance in the state of California. So this is now an advisory that's letting them know that part of their 17 days is getting them to find insurance. It's all that stuff. We've got to get better about the insurance. We're laying it off on the lenders instead of being proactive and telling the buyers, hey, listen, buyer, listen, lender, we know that insurance is going to be a problem. We need to get on it. What do we need to do? Where do we need to go? Because most people now are in California are having to end up with that California Fair Plan, and it takes longer to get the quotes, so it's causing some delays in closings. We've had, because some lenders from outside of our company that didn't understand the issues we're dealing with homeowners insurance as opposed to as it was in the past, couldn't get a buyer approved for homeowners insurance, and it was time for us to close escrow. And the listing agent and the sellers were not okay with giving the extension. Okay, so jump on the insurance stuff right at the beginning. Let them know how important it is, what the insurance market looks like. If you're working with a good lender, your lender is on top of it because they understand what's happening with the insurance. But if you're using one of these outside guys, or you're using somebody that somebody referred to you because they're new and they're, they got great deals and they're going to help your clients, just hound them about the insurance, because the last thing you want to do is for the homeowner's insurance to screw up your deal at the end when you have their, everything else done. Okay, so that's what this is. It's an advisory, just talking about what's happening in California's market and the conditions of getting the insurance. That's what that is. Any questions before now we get to the meat and potatoes, the RPA? Any questions so far? Anything? All right. You guys got it all down. Perfect. I love it. You're going to be the best. All right. Let's look at the RPA. RPA hasn't really been revised since 2022. I mean, they added a couple little things here, but nothing that are revisions that are huge, right? That changed the structure of the contract since 2022. That change was a major change that you guys are all aware of. Okay, date prepared. Pretty straightforward. That date is the date you write the offer. That's it. It's not when the offer gets submitted. It's not even, may not even be when the offer gets signed. I could prepare this offer today. We go and we were supposed to go look at property today, but we don't. We go look tomorrow. You write an offer, you sign it tomorrow. So the signature date may be February 2nd, but my prepared date is going to be February 1st. That's okay. That's all right. I don't have to redo it. Okay. That's just the prepared date. But that prepared date is going to be the date you reference on any other forms, right? Like if we do an amendment of existing agreement terms or a counteroffer, it's going to be a counteroffer to the RPA dated February 1st, not the date it was signed by the buyer, the date it was prepared, the date it was created, okay? So that's always the date that's going to get referenced. When you see that on other forms where it says this is an addendum 2 or an amendment 2, the RPA dated, that's the date you're going to look at, okay? This is an offer from all of the buyer's names. And as you can see here, you can put 4 names in here as buyer. Mercedes, you unmuted. Did you have a question? I'm guessing that was an accident. So you could put the 4 names in. Mercedes?
Hi, sorry, Kyle.
It's okay.
Again, I don't know how I'm doing it. Sorry.
Oh, it's all right. All right. All right. So you can, yes, Jesus.
Is the 4 names new?
No, it's been like that. It's been like that since, I don't remember when, before the format changed. So 4 names can go in there. Now, does it mean that all 4 of them are going to sign this purchase agreement? Only 2 can sign the purchase agreement. Anybody else would have to do an additional signature addendum, right? So let's say I had 4 buyers. You know what? Let's look at an additional signature addendum while we're talking about it. I like that we have the ability to do that. So let's put it in. Additional signature addendum. We're going to add it. So let's look at an additional signature addendum. Where did he go? Where's my forms? Here we go. Additional signature addendum. Now, I have 4 buyers. 2 of them are on the purchase agreement, signing the purchase agreement. The other 2 that are not able to sign, they're the only names going on here as buyers. Okay? So you got John Smith, Jane Smith, Mary Smith, and Tom Smith. If Jane and June or whatever, Jane and Jim sign the on the purchase agreement, then the other 2 are going to sign here. Okay? That's how the additional signature addendum works. I've seen it where people put all 4 names again. No. Just the 2 that were unable to sign the RPA. Okay, so let's see. Sal, so I'm sorry. Back to fire insurance. If you create a living trust, do we need to notify the insurance company of the name change of the living trust? That is a good question. I don't know that off the top of my head. So that is something that we'll have to research. I'm assuming no, because the original trustees are still the insured, but that is a question I can't answer for sure. So sorry, I would have to get back to you on that. Darwin, you unmuted. Did you have a question?
Yes, boss. That happened to me that escrow, it was the escrow issue that they made me sign the 4 people in the purchasing. I explained them only 2, the addendum go, no, we need, so that's a situation that happened to me. I did it, like you say, why I'm going to be fighting. But I was trying to do what you're explaining, and they say to me, no, we need the 4 people, and they have to sign 4. That's what they were asking. So in that case,
yeah, but it could have been. It just sometimes there's escrow companies that we deal with that are not independent escrows that don't know how things work. They do their own thing. Look, again, I'm not going to fight escrow. Also, I'm not going to fight the listing agent. If the listing agent calls me, look, I want to get my offer accepted. I want to get this transaction to go through. So there's certain things I'm going to fight on and certain things I'm not. Is that going to hurt my buyer to have 4 people sign even though there's no signature? No, I don't hurt them. Doesn't matter. Still them acknowledging they saw it. Okay. I just want to teach you guys to do things the right way. So I'm not advocating that you do that. But if the listing agent or the escrow requests it, just do it. Don't even push back, which is you did the right thing. Darwin, right? Don't push back. Just be like, oh, well, technically that's what we're supposed to do, but sure, I'll do that. Perfect. Don't fight them. Fighting them just makes things worse, to be honest. Okay, so we got another question here. What about future documents? Do the additional signers have to sign? Okay, well, here's the way I look at it. that's really only for the RPA. And the reason I say that is let's look at it again. If you look at it right here, I mean, I know you could see where it's the residential or the residential purchase, residential listing, or other. I know that we could do it for other things. The problem is if you look at the signatures on here, it has initials for the liquidated damages and the dispute resolution, which is obviously not something I need to do with every document you sign. Technically, should they do it this way? Yes. But as long as the listing agreement and the RPA are done with this additional signature addendum, I don't care if you force signatures onto all of the other disclosures, any amendments, any addendums. I'm not going to fight you on it. Should you do it with every one of them? Yes. But come on, it's crazy. We're going to run out of, our files are going to be like, well, most of us don't do paper anymore, but we'll be scrolling for days on our files, right? So, yeah, you should, but you don't have to. Okay, it depends on what the document is. If it's a disclosure or something like that, you don't need it. If it's an amendment to the contract, maybe you want to do it just to make sure that it's cleaner and you've done it properly. Let's get back to the RPA here. And here we go, back to page 1. All right. So we know we could put 4 names in there, but let's make sure that it is their legal correct name. Okay? Right, we know people that have their legal name is different than the name that we know them by. The lender's going to want that in their legal name. So if I were you, I would ask your buyers, let's make sure that the name we put here is the exact same name that is on your driver's license, because that's what the lender's going to require. I would do that with every one of my buyers just because I don't want later the lender to come back and go, hey, this isn't the right names, this isn't correct, okay? Lender's job is to get people qualified. They don't know the contract. They don't understand the contract, and that's not their job to understand or know the contract. Some of them do. It's not their job to. They shouldn't be the person you talk to about contracts and contingencies and things like that. It's not their job. So sometimes lenders don't understand when we have additional signature addendums, or when there's an amendment like an amendment of assignment of agreement addendum, where we add a buyer or take a buyer off. We need them name on the purchase agreement. Well, that's what we're doing with the assignment agreement. They don't get it. Sometimes you can't fight with them, and if it's what's going to hold you up from just do what they say, like we talked about earlier with the escrows and the listing agents. Don't fight them. Just get your offer accepted. As long as you're trying to do the right thing, just follow their lead. Okay. All right. So the names, make sure it's legal names. That's it. The other things that could be there besides the names are et al, ETAL, right? So it would look something like this. So it would look something like that. Okay. Let's say that's the buyer, Kyle Estrada, et al. Basically, what that's saying is it's anybody else. It's Latin. It's just like it's anybody else. I could add whoever I want. Somebody else is going to be incorporated into this purchase, right? That's one way to do it. Or it could be like this. And or assignee, right? Kyle Estrada and or assignee, which is saying I may add somebody or I may completely assign to another buyer, okay? Those things are legitimate to be in there as this is an offer from. Perfectly okay. Now, if I'm a listing agent, even though down here it says that they have 17 days to request an assignment, and where did assignment request, 3K. They have 17 days to make that request by default. Doesn't mean I have to accept it. But if I do accept the offer written like this that says and or assignee, and I don't counter it out, then I have to allow them to assign in that first 17 days. Okay? So there's a couple things that I want to do. I don't need to address the time period. 17 days is plenty because it's more than enough time before we close escrow. But what I may want to counter on the assignee would be something like, seller has the right to approve or disapprove of any assignment. Okay? I just don't want to say that I have to accept an assignment. But that's what that is. Assignment, at all kind of the same thing. It's just two different ways to write it. But if I am going to assign somebody, I'm going to use the assignment of agreement addendum to add, remove, change, assign the property. Okay. For what reasons would we not want to accept an assignment? You know, I don't have anything specific other than sometimes with assignments, the buyer that originally purchased the property is getting compensated by the assigner or the assignee. So, you know, you may not want to allow them to assign and get paid. It could be, you know, probate or have some other conservatorship or legal issue where it's, becomes difficult to get the assignment agreed upon. But there really is no downside because that person that's doing the assignment is accepting all the original terms at the time of the assignment. So it doesn't really change anything for the seller, but they do have the right to disapprove of that. Okay, property address, right? What's the street address? This first part is street address. This is the city that it's in. This is the county it's in. This is the zip code. Okay. This would be the parcel number or numbers would go here. Okay. Now, if there is a physical street address and there is only one parcel, I am okay with the parcel not being filled out. But if there is one physical address and maybe we tied two parcels together, or there's some kind of my mind just went blank with the word I'm looking for, an easement where maybe a property is built onto another APN and those have to be sold together, I would include those two APNs in there. But when you do as listing agent, you got to double check all of this stuff. You can't just, we get lax and we go down here to paragraph 3 and start looking at all of these terms as far as what's important about the offer, and we skip over this stuff. So double check your addresses as listing agent. Buyer's agent, double check your addresses before you submit the offer. Double check the APNs, double check the zips. Make sure that everything is correct before you submit. And when you're a listing agent, when you get it, one of the first things you need to check is that, because that could be a counter. I need a counter. Hey, buyer, to be aware the correct address for property is blah, 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 blah. Right? So double check that stuff. Don't get lax. Pay attention, okay, to those details. Now it says the terms of the purchase are specified below and on the following pages. Buyer and seller are referred to herein as parties. Brokers and agents are not parties to this agreement. That's important because I still have conversations with agents, and I have seen from outside agents where there is references to things that are agreements between the two brokerages or the two agents. That's not for this document. Anything in the RPA and any of the amendments or addendums that go along with the RPA are for the buyer and seller only. So if you want to negotiate commission, it isn't done here or in a counter. Never is it done here in the counter, because that commission that's being paid to the buyer's agent that was offered by the listing agent has nothing to do with the seller and the buyer. Nothing to do with them. The seller isn't paying the buyer technically, or the buyer's agent technically. The listing agent is paying them. Even though the total compensation is coming from the seller, the listing agent is the one compensating the buyer's agent. So any agreement that they have is done on a separate agreement and should never be referenced in the RPA or counteroffers or addendums. Okay? Just want to make sure that's out there, because I still hear it. I get people asking me, hey, they want to change, they tried to change the commission. They did this in the purchase agreement. Never reference commission in the purchase agreement or counters. Disclosure, this is just saying both parties receive that disclosure regarding agency relationships, because here's where we're going to confirm the agency. Okay? Now, let's say that it's a dual agent. So for us, it would be Century 21 All-Stars, and we're a dual agent, so we're going to represent both parties. But let's say that I am the listing agent and 0, 1, 4, 5, 7, 7. I still remember my license number. And this is going to be All-Stars again. And let's say that the listing agent is someone else. It's Joe Smith that works here. And then whatever their license number is, right? That's right. That's how it's going to look if it's dual agent. If it's not dual agent, it's going to go seller's agent. We're going to switch this. We're going to uncheck that. We're going to do seller's agent. That's all I am. And then this is going to be buyer. And this will be, you know, banana real estate. I spelled banana wrong, but my apologies. Right? So that's how it looks. And it has to have these boxes checked. If those boxes aren't checked, it has to be countered. As a matter of fact, I think it might have been Salvador this week got an offer, and we got an offer from somebody at an outside office at a cooperating broker, and they hadn't checked any of these boxes off. So they're not incorporated. We have to counter them back. And if the license numbers are incorrect, we also have to counter that to make sure that those license numbers are correct. Okay? So you can't leave that blank. You can't ignore it. You have to address it. And you have to address it in a counter. Or if you don't want to put in a counter, if you don't want to write out all the stuff in a counter, there is a form that is just for confirmation of agency. And you fill it out just like this paragraph, but it's a form for confirmation of agency. And you could say, confirmation of agency to be included with this counteroffer. Please sign and return with signed counteroffer. You could do that. Okay? If for some reason this is a like a buyer's agent or a co-list, whatever, there is more than one brokerage represents seller, buyer, see additional ABA. Now it added the ABA to our forms, so I could show you what that looks like. Additional broker acknowledgement. This is if you're working with an agent from outside the company. This is if I have a co-list with somebody from a different brokerage, or I'm representing a buyer together with someone from a different company. That's what that is. But for the majority of your deals, you're not going to have to deal with that because you aren't co-representing a buyer or a seller, a co-list or a co-buyer. Okay? But that's what that's for. So if there is, you have to incorporate that. Here is where they have incorporated the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent. We already went through that. Here is the terms of the purchase and the allocation of costs are now all in one paragraph. Terms of purchase and allocation costs. The items in this paragraph are contractual terms of the agreement. Reference paragraphs provide further explanation. This form is 16 pages. The parties are advised to read all 16 pages. Now, one of the things that I see a lot from you guys in your counteroffers is you're referencing these paragraphs when you're countering things. Paragraph 5B, purchase price. These are not the paragraphs. This is the paragraph. This is paragraph 3, letter A. If I'm going to reference a paragraph, it's only this far left-hand column. These columns here in the middle with the paragraphs that you're looking at, 5B, 32A, 5A, 5A, 5C, those are the reference paragraphs that give you detailed explanation of these items that we're negotiating. So for all intents and purposes, when I'm doing my counteroffer, these paragraphs are never going to come into play. Only these over here. And they're all 3. It's not just A, B, C. It's 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D1, 3D2, 3E1. Those are the paragraphs. Okay? So you have to start to understand how it works because I see a lot, especially from outside, fewer from here inside our office, that they're referencing these paragraph numbers on the side that are the reference paragraphs, and that's all they are, okay? So let's look at purchase price. Pretty straightforward. What's the purchase price? What are you offering? That's what's there. So when you write your purchase price in, when I'm an agent, if I'm a listing agent and I get it from the buyer and I don't like the purchase price, I'm going to counter back their purchase price. Straightforward. Do not mark all cash if your buyer is trying to receive some kind of hard money loan or private money financing or whatever. Do not check all cash because then that automatically removes the appraisal and the loan contingency. And even with hard money loans, there are conditions that sometimes are difficult for those investors to meet. So don't check off all cash unless it really, really, really is all cash. Okay? Close of escrow, days after acceptance. I always go that way. I never go for the date unless it's very specific that, we need to close by a specific date. Then you can ask for that. But days after acceptance is always the best way to go. I would say, guys, at a minimum do 30. I don't know how many times I get these agents that are writing these 21-day offers and they cannot close in 21 days. So you got to understand what that means, 21 days to close. Okay, so I would say that most of these escrows are still closing in 30 days. 21 days, there's a few, but it's getting more difficult, especially like we talked about with the insurance problems because of the amount of time it takes to get that done. And if you guys aren't on top of it as agents, it's get very difficult to do a 21-day close because you're not doing the things you need to do to get your buyer pushed to move faster. Okay, so I would just stick with the 30. If you can close sooner, fantastic. If you can't, then you do an extension. But let's stick to 30, okay? Expiration of offer. We talked about this. The default is 3 calendar days after all buyer signatures, right? So remember, this was prepared on February 1st, but let's say my buyers don't sign it till Saturday, that's February 3rd, and then I send it. That means it's 3 calendar days after that. So by February 6th at 5 p.m., my offer is technically expired. I don't want that to happen. So part of that conversation I have with the listing agent is I'm going to say, hey, Mr. Agent, when is it that you're going to be presenting offers? Because I'm submitting my offer right now. And they say, oh, everybody's out of town. We're not going to present until next Thursday, which is now February 8th. They need some time to write counters. So I'm just going to go, you know what? My offer now expires on Saturday, February 10th. I'm giving them plenty of time to be able to write an offer, do all this stuff before my offer expires. Or maybe I want to go all the way to Sunday, so I make it February 11th, right? I'm going to give you guys 10 days to get my offer presented and get counters so I can get my counter offers back. But if I don't need that, if they're going to present right away, then I don't need it, and 3 days is plenty, okay? But you guys got to ask the question. Be proactive. I'm telling you, little things like this, when I write an offer and I send it to a listing agent that understands how the contract works and is super professional, when they see that they told you that I'm not presenting until next Thursday and you gave me till next Sunday to respond to you, they're going to notice it. They're going to appreciate it. It's going to make sense to them. Because I guarantee you that great listing agents, when they tell you I'm not presenting until next week, they get those and go, you gave me an offer that expires. And then sometimes people put like 24 hours. So it's like it expires tomorrow. Like I'm going to put you on the hot seat. You get my offer. No, stop it. Come on, guys. It's still seller's market. Let's be smart. We want to write strong offers. We don't want to just try to stick it to people. I really hate that. I hate that from the listing agent perspective also. So let's be smart. Okay. Initial deposit amount. We've talked about this a number of times. I feel like no matter what, your bare minimum should be 10 grand. The sales prices that we work with in the state of California, your bare minimum should be $10,000. Now, I know that some agents are going to ask for 3% of the purchase price. Totally get that. I would probably do that too if I was dealing with something that was closer to $1 million and above. But in our normal sale at $600,000, $700,000, $10,000 deposit, it's pretty good. I still can't believe that I see $4,000, $2,500. You know, at a bare minimum, if my buyer doesn't want to do it, $7,500. But here's the problem. All of our buyers basically have to come in. Well, let's say 99% of our buyers have to come in with money now. Right? In this market, everybody's coming in with money. So if they don't have the money to put a $10,000 deposit and try to show their best foot forward, then maybe they're not the motivated buyer that you thought they were. Okay? So I would say at a minimum 10,000. And the reason I like the 10,000, is because it stays in that small claims arena, right? So if there does become a dispute over the deposit, we can go to small claims court instead of having to go through mediation, arbitration, fight over it. Just keep it simple, right? $10,000, that's what I would do. If I had to, less than that, $7,500, I think would probably be my bare minimum, but stick with the 10 if you can. Now, this in the contract is the only thing that is business days. So it is within 3 business days after acceptance by wire transfer, unless you want to change it to something else. Like you could change it to 1 business day and make it cashier check if you wanted to, but by default, it's in 3 business days after acceptance by a wire transfer. Leave it that way. Leave it that way. Now, 3 business days, which means if I get my offer accepted today, tomorrow is day 1, Monday is day 2, Tuesday of next week is the 3rd business day. That is when my deposit is required. Everything else in the contract is calendar days, okay? But the deposit is 3 business days. So if I have to deposit my funds in 3 business days and I get my offer accepted today, Tuesday becomes the day that I have to deposit my funds. Technically on Sunday, the listing agent could send me a notice to perform saying, hey, if your deposit's not in by Tuesday, we could cancel on you. Okay? So we'll get into notices to perform and how they work later in the contract, but just understand that this is the only item in this contract that is business days. All right? Okay, so I think we're going to stop there because it's almost noon already. And we will pick up right here next Thursday. Anybody have any questions about anything that we talked about today?
Kyle, I have a question, but it's not in regards to that.
That's okay. Go ahead, Zuli. I think we're finished for the contract for today, but go for it.
Okay. If we have an offer accepted, but the property was in escrow before and they haven't canceled, can we close?
No.
What is going to happen at the end?
You guys can't close until that one's canceled. You'll have to keep extending yours until they get the cancellation instructions signed and release that deposit.
Okay.
Yeah, you cannot close an escrow. What they should have done is written your counteroffer on your offer as subject to cancellation of previous escrow, and then that way, if they can't get that one canceled, they can cancel on you guys.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me see. For what reasons would we not want to accept an assignment? Oh, that was already. Melissa asked. That was. What do I think about 3% deposits? I mean, I don't have an issue with 3% deposits. I think they're a little excessive when we're talking about, $500,000 and $600,000 and $700,000 properties. But when someone's buying $1 million and they have to put down, $200,000 or that kind of a deposit, then or a down payment, then a 3% deposit is not an issue. But yeah, I think sometimes it's dependent. If someone's putting down a huge down payment, if I'm selling a $600,000 house and somebody's putting 50% down and they're putting a $5,000 deposit, maybe I'd be inclined to counter back to 3% just to say, okay, let's see how committed you are. But I don't know that it's necessary, to be honest, because again, going through disputes, it's just going to end up costing us money when I can stay at $10,000, which is legitimate. Nobody can afford to lose $10,000. I don't care how big your down payment is. $10,000 is going to hurt. So it still is a pretty good amount of money to put in jeopardy. I just think when you get down to that 2,500 and 5,000, there's some people that could walk away from $5,000 and be mad, but it's not going to kill them. So yeah, but I don't have a problem with the 3% deposits. I want to make sure that the sellers and the buyers understand what that means if there is some kind of dispute where that money gets stuck in escrow. What's that going to mean for you? How long is it going to take? How much money is it going to cost you to get that money back or get it released? All right, guys, anybody else? Any questions? No? All right, so we'll pick up where we left off next Thursday. Don't forget that this will be on YouTube later today if you didn't see it. And I hope to see you guys again next Thursday. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.